This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. Okay, last week, if you remember, we looked at the whole question of which pentatonic scale you need to use over any given chord sequence, and more importantly, how to tell which pentatonic scale you need to use. And there were quite a few comments of this nature in the comments section. Where else? On that video.
Great lesson. Another lesson idea would be on modal chord progressions, i.e. what chords work best for each mode.
So, yes indeed folks, we're talking about the much misunderstood topic of modes today. Don't panic, it is nowhere near as tricky or as confusing as you might think. What we're going to do for today's video is we're going to use as an example to illustrate what I want to talk about, the chord sequence from last week's video. And if you've forgotten how that goes, here it is. So as you can see, that chord sequence uses the chords of A, G and D. And, well, if you can't remember what we talked about last week or you didn't see the video, basically that is in the key of D major. Here's a little bit of a recap and sort of further explanation on where we got to last week. Okay, just recapping a little bit on the stuff that we've done previously. You may remember this thing from the cycle of fifths. If you want to find out what chords are in any key, you basically pick your key in the cycle and then go either side of that key, and that will tell you the chords. So for example, in the key of D, you can see here we have a D major chord, then either side of that a G major and an A major chord. So we also have minor chords in the key as well, and this is the relationship to find your minor chord. Basically, you can see there that the relative minor of a D major is B minor. The relative minor of a G major is E minor, and the relative minor of an A major is F sharp minor. So we have three major chords in the key of D, D, G and A, and we have their relative minors, which are B minor, E minor and F sharp minor. And what we're going to do now is rearrange those in ascending order like this. There is also one other chord that we get in a major key, and that is essentially one semitone below your tonic chord, which in this case is D. You will get a diminished chord. So we have a C sharp diminished chord in the key as well. So we're going to number those chords from 1 to 7 like this using Roman numerals. So if ever you've heard the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 4 chord, the 3 chord or anything like that, this is what this refers to. And what we've got is basically 7 chords here that we can use as focal points for a chord sequence, tonalities we call them. And if you're in the key of D and you make the D major chord the central chord to what's going on, so everything resolves back to a D chord, then you are in the Ionian mode. If, however, you bias everything towards the E minor chord, and that is the chord that your ear detects as being the focal point, the tonality, you're in the Dorian mode. Do the same thing with the F sharp minor chord, you're in the Phrygian mode. Do the same thing with the G major chord, you're in the key of D, but you might be gravitating the whole chord sequence back to a G chord, you're in the Lydian mode. Basically take the 5 chord, which is in this case the A major, and make everything resolve back to that. You are in the Mixolydian mode. If you take the 6 chord, which in this case is B minor, and make that the chord that you're putting in the limelight, so to speak, and make that the centre of attention, then you are in the Aeolian mode. And if you were able to take a diminished chord, like the C sharp diminished, the 7 chord in a key, and make everything sound resolved heading back to that chord, then you would be in the Locrian, or some people say Locrian mode. That mode, though, is really just there to make up the numbers. It doesn't tend to get used because a diminished chord sounds like this. And how are you going to make a chord sequence sound resolved and settled and at rest, landing on that chord? It's a chord that by its very nature always wants to move on to a different chord and resolve elsewhere. So we can essentially disregard the Locrian mode in the whole topic of modal chord sequences. So if you're thinking, well, how do I remember all of these mode names and the order in which they occur from 1 to 7? Well, there is a very handy little mnemonic that most guitarists will find really easy to remember. It goes like this. I decided playing loud means a lot, which reminds you of Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian and Locrian, the one that doesn't get used. And once again, the chord sequence that we've been looking at is in the key of D major, but it is centred on the 5 chord, the A major chord, which means it's in the Mixolydian mode. So there you have it. That chord sequence is in what we call the Mixolydian mode because it is gravitating towards the 5 chord in the key, the chord of A in the key of D rather. So here's another example. Take a look at this little reference sheet here. This, by the way, is one of the resources that will be up on Patreon for my wonderful Patreon supporters. Basically what it is, it's a list of all of the chords and modes in every key. So let's imagine we had a song that was using the chords of C, D minor, F and G. If you look closely, you'll see that each of those chords occurs in other keys, but there's only one key where all 4 of those chords will occur together, and that is the key of C. So if you've got a song which is, using those 4 chords, there is no question about it. It is definitely in the key of C major. But here's a song that uses those 4 chords, which you'll probably recognise, that doesn't sound like it's in the key of C major. So there you go. I'm sure you recognise that one. That was, by the way, the last Christmas #1 of the 1970s in the UK. That's a useless bit of trivia for you. Anyway, so we can see, if we look back at that chart there, that, that chord sequence is very much centred around a D minor chord. That is the tonality. That is the chord that everything seems to lead back to, but we're in the key of C major. And if you are focusing on the D minor chord in the key of C major, you are in the Dorian mode. So you see how this works. What you're doing is you're thinking about what key you're in and which chord within that key is the tonality, and then whereabouts in the key that chord is. Is it the Ionian, is it the Dorian, is it the Phrygian, and so on. That's what modes are all about. They are primarily driven by the chord sequence that you're playing over. The thing is, though, many people seem to think of modes as being a lead guitar phenomenon. It's like, I'm going to use the Mixolydian mode for this solo. I'm going to use the Dorian mode for this solo. So what is all that about? Well, once again, here's a little bit of an explanation pertaining to our chord sequence from last week. Well, we already know that the A major pentatonic works over this chord sequence. We established that last week in the episode on tonality. And if you missed that, I'll link to that in the description. But let's assume that you're okay with the A major pentatonic. Here's one particular pattern of it. And the notes in that scale, as you can see on screen, are A, B, C sharp, E and F sharp. So A, B, C sharp, E, F sharp, A, B, C sharp, E, F sharp, and then back to A again. So what do we do to play in a more modal way rather than a pentatonic way? Well, we look at the chord sequence, and we know there is a G chord in the chord sequence, which must obviously contain a G note. So we can add the G note into our A major pentatonic, because it's not in the pentatonic, is it? And we know there's a D chord in the chord sequence, which must contain a D note. So we can add the D note into the pentatonic scale. It's not there in the pentatonic, so we add it in. And that then gives us something that looks like this. We have A, B, C sharp. There's our pentatonic notes, or some of them anyway. Add in the D there. E, F sharp, pentatonic notes, add in the G there, and then what we've done is we've taken an A major pentatonic and added in D and G notes, and that gives us the A mixolydian mode. Now this is where one of the big myths about modes really kind of gets some traction. It's, all you do is you take a D major scale, because that is what we've got. The notes in that I'm playing here now are essentially a D major scale. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp and G. That's a D major scale, and you notice I've started it on the A note. So people tend to think that, well, what you've got to do is take the D major scale and start it on an A note, and that gives you the A mixolydian mode. That's not really getting to the core of it. What we're doing here is we've got a chord sequence which is in the key of D major, but the tonality, the kind of central chord, the musical centre of gravity is the A chord. So we use A major pentatonic and we prioritise those notes, and we're just using the extra notes, the D and the G, almost like garnish. So you could take, for instance, an A major pentatonic lick, something like that, and just add the G note in. Like that. It gives it just that little bit of a mixolydian flavour. You could take an A major pentatonic lick like that, and maybe add in the D note like that, and that gives it again a little bit more of that mixolydian flavour, a little bit more of that modal flavour. And once you start adding both notes in, it really does ramp up the mixolydian flavour of it. So something like that gives you that real sort of mixolydian sound, but you can hear it's gravitating back to an A. It's not about the note that you start on. For instance, I could take another pattern of A major pentatonic. Let's do this one here, which is actually starting on a B note. Okay. And again, add in the G notes and D notes from the chords, and we will get something that isn't necessarily starting on an A note, but sounds A mixolydian. Okay, that would be a typical sort of mixolydian type lick. Like that. I ended on the A there, but that's incidental. Okay, it doesn't matter where you start or finish, it's the notes that you prioritise, and you prioritise the notes of the A major pentatonic because the tonality is A major, and then you just throw in a little bit of garnish from the notes from outside the pentatonic that crop up in the chords, and that's a general blueprint for how you can play modally. Focus on the core pentatonic that matches the tonality, and then just, kind of throw in some extra notes that you can find by looking within the notes in the chords in the chord sequence. That is how you play modal lead guitar parts. So there you go. All you do is you find your pentatonic in the way we described and detailed last week, basically looking for the tonality, and then you add into that pentatonic any notes that aren't already there that you gather from the underlying chord sequence. And yes, in the case of the A Mixolydian mode, it does just give you the same notes as the D major scale. But it's not about starting the D major scale on the A note. What it's about is prioritizing the notes which are, linked inextricably to the tonality, the pentatonic scale, which matches the A major tonality. And then you just treat the other notes as garnish, as I said in that clip there. Finally today, here is a solo where I am using the A major pentatonic with the garnish notes of D and G over the top of that chord sequence, and this will give you a bit of an idea of what the Mixolydian mode sounds like as a soloing vehicle. And there is, of course, a full tab for that solo in both Guitar Pro and PDF formats, along with the backing track I was using, and that little reference sheet that we looked at earlier. All of that is up on my Patreon page. There's the address, and the link is in the description. And that is pretty much all I've got for you today. Hopefully you've got a little bit more understanding of what's going on with modes than you did at the start of this video, and if that's the case, then I've succeeded in what I set out to do today. If you've enjoyed the video, found it useful, informative, and maybe a little bit inspiring, then please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so, and why not give me a like while you're at it. Don't forget the live stream on Friday, 5 PM UK time. Every Friday we sit around and have a few beers and talk about matters of a musical nature or anything else that may crop up. It's a great way to kick off the weekend, and I'd love to see you there. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.